Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. Now today we're looking at something really interesting. It's about love and careers. When couples move, is it a win-win for both people? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you. That's exactly what this research dives into. It looks at what happens to couples' earnings when they relocate. And get this, they focused on two countries that are pretty different, Germany and Sweden.
Germany and Sweden. Huh. That's a pretty interesting combo. What makes them so different in this context?
Okay, so think about it. Germany has these kind of more traditional ideas about gender roles, especially when you compare like former East and West Germany, and then you've got Sweden. They're always seen as like the poster child for gender equality. So it's a really cool comparison, you know?
Right.
It looks at what happens to their careers,
Oh, interesting.
especially like how their earnings change.
Mm-hmm.
But the really interesting part, it digs into whether moving affects men and women differently.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Watch 'em all drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
It looks at what happens to couples' earnings when they relocate. And get this, they focused on two countries that are pretty different, Germany and Sweden.
Germany and Sweden. Huh. That's a pretty interesting combo. What makes them so different in this context?
Okay, so think about it. Germany has these kind of more traditional ideas about gender roles, especially when you compare like former East and West Germany, and then you've got Sweden. They're always seen as like the poster child for gender equality. So it's a really cool comparison, you know?
Right. Makes sense. So what exactly did they look at in this study?
So they took data on couples who moved between 1995 and 2007 in Sweden and 2001 to 2011 in Germany. But they didn't look at every couple. They focused on couples where at least one person was between 25 and 45 years old when they moved.
Gotcha. The prime time for building a career. So did they find anything different in how men and women did financially after moving?
This is where it gets interesting. They found this thing called a gender earnings gap, and it happens after relocation in both countries. Basically, men's earnings usually go up after a move, but women's earnings kind of stay the same or even drop a bit.
Wait, even in a place like Sweden, they're known for being all progressive and stuff, men still end up making more money when couples move.
Yeah, it's true. Even in Sweden, there's a pretty big difference. In Germany, men's earnings jumped by about 10%. That's like 4,500 euros on average. And this happened in the first 5 years after moving. In Sweden, the increase was smaller, like around 5% or 1,700 euros. But it's still a noticeable difference.
Okay, so men are seeing a financial plus side to moving. What about the women?
For women, it's not as good. Their earnings usually didn't go up after a move, and sometimes they even saw their income dip, at least for a while. This means that the share of household income that women contribute actually went down after relocating.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal. It really makes you question this whole idea that moving is good for both partners. Did they try to figure out why women were taking this earnings hit?
Oh yeah, they definitely did. One of the big reasons is job disruption. Women are just more likely to have their careers interrupted right after a move. They might have to spend time looking for a new job, or they might have to take a job that doesn't really use all their skills.
Yeah, it makes sense. It takes a while to find the right opportunities in a new city. I get how that could affect earnings, especially in the short term. But do things eventually even out?
Well, that's the thing. The study actually found that the difference in earnings between men and women stuck around even 5 years after the move.
5 years. That's a long time. It's not just a little blip. It makes you think there's something bigger going on here. Could this be because of having kids? Are women maybe taking more time off work after a move to start families?
That's a good question. And the researchers thought about that too. But guess what? They found the same pattern even with couples who didn't have kids.
Really? So starting a family isn't the main reason for this earnings gap. It really seems like there's something more basic about how these decisions are being made in couples. Did the study give any clues about what might be driving this difference?
Yeah, they looked at two main explanations. One is the difference in what men and women could potentially earn.
So is it possible that men are just in jobs that pay more, and that's why they get bigger raises after moving?
That's definitely part of it. But they also found evidence that the way society views gender roles plays a big part. And comparing East and West Germany gives us some really interesting insights on this.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about this East versus West Germany thing.
Well, remember how East Germany had way more women working compared to West Germany?
Exactly.
They found that couples with at least one partner from East Germany, they actually had a smaller difference in earnings over the long term after they moved.
A smaller gap, you say. How much smaller?
Yeah, for sure. The long-term earnings gap for these couples was like around 3,100 euros. But for couples with no East German background, it was way bigger, like a whopping 7,000 euros.
Wow, that's a huge difference. It really does seem like how a society views work and family really impacts those money decisions after a move. But if it's not just about how much people could earn, then what else is causing this difference between men and women?
Well, they looked a bit closer at how couples decide to relocate, especially when something big happens like losing a job. And what they found was super interesting.
Oh, I'm hooked. Tell me what they found out about layoffs.
Okay, so get this. When a man lost his job, it made the couple way more likely to move.
How much more likely are we talking here?
In Germany, it was a 50% increase.
Yeah.
And in Sweden, a man's layoff basically doubled the chances they'd move.
Whoa, that's a big jump.
Yeah.
So if the guy loses his job, they're much more likely to pack up and move. What about if the woman gets laid off?
That's the crazy part. It barely made a difference if the woman lost her job.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's a huge contrast. It kind of makes you wonder, even if they don't realize it, are couples putting the man's career first when they make these big life changes?
That's a good point.
Ah.
And to figure that out, they use these things called household decision-making models. It's a way to look at how families weigh different things when they're deciding stuff. What they found was that in both Germany and Sweden, families consistently cared more about the man's earnings when making decisions.
So even in Sweden, where everyone thinks they're all about equality, there's still this thing where the man's job is more important.
Exactly. It shows how strong those traditional ideas about gender are, even in places that try really hard to be equal. But there's another piece to this puzzle, right? What about when the woman is the one bringing home the bacon? Does her career matter more then?
That's a really good question. It seems like things would have to be different in that situation, right? Did the study look at that at all?
They did. And it's pretty interesting. In Sweden, the women who were the main breadwinners, they actually did better after moving compared to women in the same situation in Germany.
Okay, so maybe there's some hope. Maybe in more progressive places, people are more willing to support whoever makes more money, whether it's the man or the woman.
Maybe. But even when the woman was the main earner, the man's earnings often still got a bigger bump after the move. It seems like even though we're making progress, there's still a long way to go.
This is all pretty heavy stuff. We've seen some really strong evidence that moving, even in places that seem progressive, can reflect those old school gender roles. And that can have big consequences for women's careers and their finances in the long run. But it's not all bad news, right? There have to be some ways to fix this imbalance.
Of course. Recognizing the problem is the first step. And the study does offer some ideas about how to make things better, both with policy changes and by shifting those deep-seated societal norms.
Okay, let's talk solutions then. What kind of policy changes could make things fairer?
One big idea is to share the burden of moving more equally. This could mean offering better help with finding a job for the trailing spouse, the partner who moves for the other person's job.
Oh yeah, the trailing spouse. Usually the woman, right? We really need to stop using that term. It's kind of demeaning. But I totally agree. Helping both people find a good job in the new place is so important.
Exactly. And it's not just about any job. It's about making sure both partners have real chances to grow their careers and move up no matter who decided to relocate.
That makes a lot of sense. Did the researchers suggest any other policy changes?
Yeah, they also said it's important to help women get back to work faster after a move.
Right. Anything that makes that transition smoother and helps women find work quickly in a new city would be amazing.
For sure. And more broadly, they talked about making workplaces more flexible, like offering remote work options, flexible hours, and good parental leave policies. Those things help everyone, but they're especially important for women who often have to balance work with taking care of family.
Flexibility is key. Those policies would be a game changer for helping women keep their careers going after a move. But even with the right policies, we still need to tackle those deep-rooted societal norms, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Policies alone can't fix it. We need a real culture shift. We need to question this idea that men's careers automatically come first.
I agree. We need to think about dual career couples in a new way. one that recognizes and values what both partners bring to the table. It's not just about splitting chores or childcare. It's about changing how we think about ambition and success in a relationship.
That's a great point. It's about respecting and supporting each other's goals, both personal and professional.
I think that brings us back to something we talked about earlier. Even when women were the primary earners, men's earnings often benefited more from a move. Maybe there's something about feeling entitled here. Like maybe some men, even if they don't realize it, feel like they have the right to put their careers first, even if it's not the best financial decision for the whole family.
That's really insightful. It makes you think about the power dynamics in relationships and how those expectations from society affect those dynamics.
It's like even in couples who see themselves as progressive, there might be this hidden bias that ends up hurting women in the long run.
And remember, this isn't just about individual couples. It's a bigger issue for society. When women are held back in their careers, the whole economy suffers. It means we lose out on talent, innovation, and potential economic growth.
True. So it's in everyone's best interest to make sure everyone, no matter their gender, has the chance to be their best.
Exactly. And that starts with recognizing these biases
Yeah.
and taking real steps to fix them.
Okay, we've covered a lot today. What's the takeaway for our listeners?
It's a lot to take in, but hopefully it gets people thinking.
So as we wrap up all this research, what's the big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the main point is that even in countries that seem super progressive, those choices about moving for a job, they can really reflect those old-fashioned ideas about gender roles. And, those ideas, they can have a huge impact, a lasting impact on women's careers and how well they do financially overall.
Yeah, and it's not just about the money. We're talking about real people, real relationships, real hopes and dreams. Something that seems like a simple decision, like moving for a job. It can actually have these ripple effects, and it can affect how much a woman earns her financial independence, even her retirement savings, way down the line.
Totally. It's a good reminder that even those decisions that seem really personal, they can be shaped by these bigger societal pressures and expectations.
That's a really good point. It makes me think about all the couples I know who have moved over the years. I'm kind of looking at those moves differently now. What about you? Have you seen similar patterns in your own life or with people you know? Maybe in your family or among your friends or even in your own career.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. Once you start noticing these patterns, you see them everywhere.
It's true. Awareness is so important. By noticing these patterns and understanding what's really going on, we can start to question those assumptions, make smarter choices, and fight for a fairer future for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. When we create a world where both partners have a real chance to succeed, everyone wins.
Well said. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive. It's been really eye-opening. And to our listeners, keep thinking about this stuff. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for a world where everyone, no matter their gender, can reach their full potential. See you next time.